You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cantina Cast. This is episode 237, or 2337, Lando and L3-37. My name is Albert Padilla, and I'm joined by someone who looks great for his age. Please welcome our Cantina Cast muddy buddy, Jonesy. Jonesy, how's it going?
Doing well, Albert. How about yourself?
I'm good. Got a little bit of a sniffle, so I'm going to apologize to you and anyone listening ahead of time in case something happens here.
We're going to make our way through it.
We'll get to it, yeah. Yeah, it's good to be back and talking about Lando and L3-37. But before we do, let's get into. We had to pick through some of the news. So there's kind of some good stuff that's going on right now, and there's some little minor things that are happening that we really can't confirm or probably shouldn't even talk about right now. But I think one of the bigger ones is this story. So Ram Bergen he got the Achievement in Film Award for Israeli Film Festival in Los Angeles, right? And
right, yeah, presented by Mark Hamill.
Yeah, presented by Mark Hamill. But that's not the story, right? The story ended up being something else. Can you tell the listeners what we got from that?
Yeah, he dropped just a couple little tidbits. So first, he confirmed that he was going to produce all three of Rian Johnson's new trilogy, which again isn't surprising.
Yeah, probably not a big surprise.
Joined at the hip. A lot of trust there, right? And we saw that in the documentary on Last Jedi Blu-ray. But the kind of the bigger news is that we got our first glimpse around what a release date might be for the first of the series in that trilogy. And to quote Ron Bergman, it may be in 2 years. It's just the early stages. So this suggests a 2020, 2021. The way the question was framed was more about when would we see a release, but I've seen others interpret this more of when might they start filming as well. So a 2020 release seems like that's pretty quick unless they were really getting the ball rolling here in the next 8 months or so.
Yeah,
maybe a year. Nah, that's pretty tight. So little unclear there, but first glimpse of this might not be all that far on the horizon, which probably not a surprise.
Yeah, and 2021. I mean, I guess if Johnson's been working on it and they've kind of gotten rid or done a lot of the pre-production stuff. I don't mean literal pre-production, but just a lot of the, getting the script and, making sure that he's got all the plot elements in place that he wants to hit, and he's got character names and all that other stuff. It seems like if he's got that out of the way, I don't know, 2021 is not too far away. I mean, it's not that too aggressive, I guess, but now
it leaves you that 2020. If you do this 2021, you got 2019 for episode 9, and then what is going to slot into 2020, presuming that we have a movie every year, right?
Yeah, maybe another, solo or one, not solo literally, but one of the standalone Star Wars stories or something. Who knows? Yeah,
and there's a lot of speculation that's where a Kenobi or a Boba Fett or something like that would slot right between everything. So, but we'll have to see, because presumably maybe in Celebration next year we'll have hopefully a little bit better idea of what's going to be happening here just in the next, by that point, 18 to 24 months.
Yeah. And I read that article. I thought it was really cool. Ram Bergman just seems like a really neat guy, and kind of reading about how he got started and, from coming over to the States and just going straight over to California. And, here he is now working with some of the best people in the industry. So very cool guy. Okay. So on top of that, so E3 is it still going on as of this recording?
No. So today is June 14th. Yeah. It ended on Tuesday, the 12th, I believe.
Okay. Yeah.
They wrapped everything up.
Yeah. So they wrapped everything up. But in there, we got some Star Wars news, primarily from EA Play. And it was a lot of Battlefront 2 news. Now, before we get into the news, I'm just going to say this. Was it weird to you? Like when I watched that presentation, it's only like a 4-minute presentation. So go look for it if you can. But, it just seemed really dead. Right. And I've been to a couple of E3s in my lifetime. But I just thought there would be more hoorah coming from the audience. It just seemed really subdued. And I don't know, I'm not saying that means anything, or maybe it does. I don't know. Maybe haven't had even touched Battlefront in quite some time, but I just wonder if people were really just not excited by it, or there was something weird going on at the show that I'm not aware of. But it was just very subdued, very lazy, pedestrian in terms of the presentation. But I don't know. Did you get any of that feeling from it, or did you feel sorry for that guy that was up there kind of trying to get everybody excited, and there was just like crickets half the time?
Yeah, and so I was listening. Our friend Crowley has Bad Gamers Anonymous, and I was listening to their E3 reaction and recap show, and it sounds like the presentations in general fell pretty flat this year. And I didn't listen to everyone, but I did watch this one. And if this one was any indication of how some of the other ones went, then yeah, this was not an exciting E3 at least from a studio presentation perspective. But
well, and it sounded it still sounded very apologetic. Like they were coming out saying, hey, we really screwed up. We're so sorry. I'm like, dude, I'm so tired. I get it. You screwed up. I think they've done everything they need to, and maybe they just haven't. And that's my opinion. I'm not saying there are people out there that feel the same, but
sure. And EA's got such a publicity problem. I mean, they have for a number of years. They've routinely been voted one of the least popular companies in the U.S. So it's not surprising that it's not surprising insofar as that they didn't really own this up front, and so I think they're trying to gain that goodwill again by continuing to own up. But you're right, it's time to move on, and I think we all collectively feel that we could start to kind of put the launch behind us. Let's just move on from that. Let's focus on the new content, because quite honestly, some of the new content really does sound interesting. It sounds like this is what people want. So focus on that. And you're right. Get some energy behind it. Get somebody who has some pizzazz on stage. So,
right. I don't know where this guy came from, but
I don't know.
In a cube somewhere on Global 5 there, or the 5th floor.
Well, I mean, he seemed like a nice guy and very well spoken, but I don't want the corporate head out there either, right? I don't need the corporate speak, but give me someone who's going to be excited and be able to convey that emotion, so that we're going to leave that kind of announcment, with that same excitement.
All right. So enough of that.
So let's get that excitement.
Let's get the excitement going.
What is that excitement? Let's do it.
So what do you got? What are some of the stuff? And there's a lot here. We can go over all of it, or what stood out for you from all that's the content that's coming out.
Right. So we've got the new solo season starting. And so Castle looks really cool. And there's a new game mode too called Extraction. So that seems like that's going to be pretty neat. The one thing I'm actually most excited about of all the things they said has been a complaint since day one, has been the squad system.
Yeah, yes, it's such a thing.
I know, it's like thankfully, right? So they're finally making it easier to team up with your friends. Before it was random. It's whenever you had to respawn, you just got spawned on with whoever else needed to respawn too, and only up to a group of 4. So I don't know exactly what this translates into, but anything different than what we have. Yeah. And this is where, like, not to get into a whole battle or a video game discussion, but the Battlefield franchise, which is also by EA, has a really awesome team, like squad dynamic where you can spawn on each other, which is more common in these first person shooter type of games. So I really hope they go and adopt some of that, because it keeps your team together, keeps everybody engaged in the game. Little things like that can make a huge difference. Yeah. Were there any modes that jumped out to you, or any announcements?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously the big one for me was the Clone Wars content, right? Announcing that we were finally getting the Clone Wars. And that's the one that I think I got a little bit of cheering, but it was just kind of like, yay. And I'm, in my mind, I'm thinking, heck yeah, this is awesome. I can't wait. But yeah, just getting Clone Wars content. And with that, they announced General Grievous, General Kenobi, Count Dooku, and then the big one that he kind of was, again, he's like leading up to it, and he's like, and Anakin Skywalker, and it was just like, yay. And I'm thinking, heck yeah, this is awesome. I can't wait to play Anakin Skywalker.
Well, I have to correct you on Kenobi. It was Jedi Master Kenobi.
Oh, that's right, at the time. You're right.
It was just regular old Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah, sorry.
So there's, to this day, he's still not on the council. He's still not going to get that. He's not going to get that respect.
Yeah. Sorry. And I was trying to paraphrase. I was trying to honestly remember what he said, because you have to watch the video, like that whole delivery. Like this was like the big bang, right? It was Clone Wars, and that got a little bit, and then he was trying to build up and announce these, Yeah, Grievous, and then
Grievous got the biggest I think, cheer. Yeah,
yeah, and don't get me wrong, like that was the cool one, right? That you lead in with that one. But I mean, you had Kenobi, Dooku, but then you had Anakin, which I thought could have been a pretty big reveal. And then there was like no pictures of him either. It was just Grievous' face up there, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's the only one I remember.
So maybe that was part of it too. It was like, yeah, that's cool, but we have nothing to look at. But anyways,
and they didn't really talk about like the other Clone Wars, like the skinning or anything like that for Clone Troopers. We're assuming it's going to be there, right?
That was it. That literally was all very surface. And we got Geonosis. I think they announced as far as one of the planets.
Well, and there's a new starfighter mode, so dogfighting with hero ships. So it's like hero mode, but with starships. So I think that actually might be pretty fun because depending on how many they let in the battle, that might be actually pretty fun.
Yeah, sounds good. So, I mean, I don't know. I think it's enough for me to get in. I think it's probably going to be enough for me to jump back in and just give it a whirl and get to play those
and in
characters.
Discord, there's some people who are interested in it, so they were trying to get another. Let's make another go with this. I think even Mike was like, "Well, I might be able to give that another go." So if you're on there, look us up on PlayStation. We might be on there.
That's one I've got. I had like 4 new friend requests on PlayStation Network the other day. I thought, where are these guys coming from? But I get it now.
You're just that popular.
No, I'm not. Someone spammed the list in Discord and saw my name, and so they added me. That's all. All right, and then we had another title. So Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order was announced. What do we got going on here?
So this is the game that Respawn has been working on, or Visceral, and it really didn't have much to it. I don't even know if they actually announced it at E3, because I saw this on the website and through Twitter. But anyway, it's an original story about a surviving Padawan. So it's set shortly after the events of Revenge of the Sith. So this is a little bit, some people are a little bit not super thrilled about this one so far, just because we've flirted with this territory before and it's a little bit revisionist. So the only thing I'd say to that is that it is a video game and people want to play as Jedi. So when you play Star Wars, not everybody all the time, but I think Jedi are still interesting in this era. It still has some moments that people would want to explore and see what kind of story that they're going to tell. So but we don't really have much from it. We know that it's coming out holiday season of 2019. So this is a full 18 months plus in advance, or 18 months-ish in advance. So that's way out there.
Yeah, but it's going to fall. So and I guess I'm sorry, but this is supposed to take place like in between episodes 3 and 4. I imagine you're being hunted either by Inquisitors or Vader himself. Maybe that's where it culminates. Maybe the Emperor. Who knows who pops in and out? But it's part of that. And I guess for me on this one, and it's very early. Granted, my initial reaction was kind of similar. Like, all right, we've been in this territory before, and it's starting to feel really watered down in terms of how many, was Order 66 really as, thorough as we thought back when we first saw it? And at this point, I would say no, because it just seems like there were a lot of people that slipped through the cracks. Now, granted, I don't even know what the final count was total Jedi at the time. And if you really were to do the math and add up the ones that we definitely know about it, it's still like a 1%, less than 1% amount that actually survived, which makes sense, I guess. But I don't know. It just felt kind of weird. But I'm going to hold my final reservations and judgment until I actually see the game, because for all I know, and kind of to your point, I think it would be cool to play a Jedi. I've always enjoyed it, and maybe it's got like a horror, not a horror, but kind of like a thrilling kind of vibe to it, where you're just constantly in fear of something happening to you, even as a Jedi, because you're being hunted the entire time. That'd be kind of a neat twist on a Star Wars game. Yeah,
I'm curious what the driving force of the game would be, since we know. I don't know. There's not a lot of hope in this time period, so I'm not really sure what will keep the story driving forward. But one of the other things interesting about it, and you had pointed this out, was that there might be some tie-ins with the current Vader comic.
Oh yeah, Matt Martin had come out, so he's part of the story group on Twitter just the other day, if not today, yesterday, somewhere on there. But he mentioned that we would get some story lead-in to this video game through the Vader comic, kind of running through that thread running through that comic book. So if you are following that Vader comic, then you'll probably get some tidbits and kind of see what they're setting up for maybe plot elements and that kind of thing in this game when it comes out. So,
and that's a very good comic series, so highly recommend it anyway.
Yeah. And then the last thing we had is just very briefly, if you're a listener of the show, even recently, or go back as far as you'd like, Joseph Campbell has been something that we've brought up from time to time, especially when we're talking about Luke and Vader, and really just the heroes, all of the heroes in general. But that finally made it out to Netflix. And is this the same one that came out, and I haven't seen it, but is this the same one that came out in I want to say the 80s or 90s? It's just now on Netflix, or is this a new series? It's called Power of Myth.
Right, yeah. So Joseph Campbell and the Power of Myth. This is the one. I don't think it goes back that far. I meant to write down the date, but I don't remember. But yeah, I think it's an 8-episode season, and for season 1, and it's on Netflix. George Lucas is in there, of course, and Joseph Campbell himself. So yeah, this was the TV series that you're thinking of.
Yeah,
I don't know if it goes back that far, though.
I might have the years wrong, but I think I remember this when it came out.
It's nothing new, though. I don't believe it's anything new. But yeah, it's something out there to go watch, and you can kind of see the ideas behind these stories and behind the mythology and the hero's journey and a few other things too.
Yeah,
so,
honestly, if you've never seen it and you start watching, I guarantee you're going to start going, oh my gosh, your eyes are going to light up because you will see.
I'm excited because I'm one of those people. I've never watched this before, so I'm excited to go see it and just kind of hear it firsthand rather than interpreted through, books and through, podcasts and other commentary. So,
yeah. All right. So let's do this. We're going to talk Lando and L3-37. We'll tie these back to obviously Han and Chewie and everybody else as much as we can. And really, for these two characters, let's just start off by saying we don't have a whole lot, to be honest. I mean, we got what we got in the movie, and we'll primarily focus on that. We'll kind of pull from the official guide too to kind of help fill in some holes here and there. But the trail goes cold, so to speak, right after the movie's over, and that's obviously by design because there's more story that needs to be told there for at least for Lando. I think L3-37, we know her fate. But yeah, there's some interesting things in here that as part of research and watching the movies that I think that we'll kind of pull out. But I think the first question you posed out here was, who is Lando when we meet him at the lodge on Vandor? Was he the smuggler? Is he the gambler? Is he the bucking professional businessman? What would you say he is at this point?
Yeah, the official guide tells us that he's actually retired from smuggling. So, and he's on the professional gambler circuit. Sabak in particular knows all the variations of it. And I feel like we get that. I think we see that he isn't really doing the smuggling thing. He's enjoying this life of, I'm going to use the word luxury in quotes here, finger quotes, because I don't know that I'd call Vandor or the lodge luxury accommodation.
That's right. That's the best place you could find to go retire, is that stinking, dirty looking lodge. I mean,
right. And maybe this is the time where we had this question a little bit later, but when we see him in this environment and the company he's keeping and the games he's playing, I really started to question whether Lando was really a winner or a loser from this perspective, especially in the gambling arena, but just generally in life, because we saw that the Falcon is impounded.
Yeah, we got to come back to that because I have a question about that.
Sure, yeah, and it's not really clear, where he's at. Is he wealthy? We see the model. We see that he's invested in the Falcon. We see the model of Cloud City on the Falcon, but we don't really know if he's wealthy from smuggling or is he just barely paid off of his debts, because we know that he's interacted with Voss in the past, and when he sees Kira, he reminds her that, hey, they're fair and square now. They're all caught up. So clearly he's better off than Han is when we see him in A New Hope. But where do you think he's at this point in his life from what we've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, so again, going back to the guide, I mean, yeah, it does say that he was, retired now, based on the company he's keeping. I think he's probably more myth than reality. And that's why, and I think he's in that infancy of ensuring that people are believing any and all stories they've heard, right? And going back to that line of everything you heard about me is true. I think he's still kind of creating that name for himself, or at least whatever name he's created so far, he's really just trying to propagate, and make himself to be bigger than he really is.
Right.
I don't even
like his memoirs.
Yeah, exactly. The memoirs that he's recording now, which I think I have something else on that a little bit later, but I forgot my train of thought there. But so I think for him at this point, it's really just about, yes, I think he's done some things, and he had that, he's probably mingled with a couple of different big time bounty hunters or big time crime bosses or whatever. But I think he's really, let's just talk about the Millennium Falcon, right? So if you're really that big of a guy, and I don't know, and maybe if it's in the guide, or I didn't catch it in the movie, that's for sure, but they really say why the Millennium Falcon was impounded. Do you have any theories as to why that would be?
Well, the running joke is that he had parking tickets for being there so long.
Not more parking tickets.
I know, right? So
what is up with the gas?
So the way I viewed it in the film was it was impounded because he couldn't pay. So I viewed it as he was losing, and they locked his ship in place so he couldn't go anywhere, or whatever you want to draw from that. But I viewed that as that he was still trying to climb out of debt or climb out of some situation that he got himself into in gambling, even if it looks like he was doing pretty well at the time we actually pop in. He hadn't gone and cleared that up quite yet. Yeah.
Well, I would say then, if that really is the case, he must have had a lot of debt, because Kira knew where he was, right? So it had to be a place that he visited, or at least was a resident of to some extent, or maybe there's a story that we just don't know. I'm probably assuming too much. Maybe it could have been as just, hey, Lando, we need to come by and see you. Where are you right now? Oh, I'm over here on Vandor. Okay, we'll be there shortly, kind of thing. Or if not, if she didn't make that call, then yeah, you'd have to assume that, that the Millennium Falcon's probably been impounded for a while, and he does have an insurmountable debt that he's got to pay off. And, maybe he has his good days, he has his bad days, but right. He's still just stuck on Vandor and trying to get out of there. So,
well, and it could be the guide suggested that there are these games all across the galaxy that are well known and popular. So it's possible that this is just one of those hotspots, and it just, I don't know, cinematically, I think that's the right word, right? Yeah. So cinematically, it just looks, a little darker and dingier because, that's what you would assume for an underground poker game, right? So that type of thing. But yeah, the guide kind of suggested there's a lot of these across the galaxy. So it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that Kira had an idea where he would be based on keeping track of the local gambling. And if you're part of an organization that is, predicated on knowing as much as possible about the underground world, presumably you know where all the gambling's happening too, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Especially if they owe you money.
Yeah, right. So I got a question for you. Would you say that Kira and Lando had a fling or were together at any point? There's one line in there when she's talking about, she's boasting about him, and you can see Han's like, okay. And then they cut, and he's got one big, and then, or what, it's something to that effect, right? It's not his ship. That's not what she's talking about. But they kind of allude to it, I guess, or it's kind of tongue in cheek, right? So maybe it's a story she's heard, but then it just got me thinking, wondering, like, well, maybe they did have a relationship at one point, or I don't know. And you don't get much of that again, right? There's no love triangle happening, that's for sure.
I assume that Lando has had a physical relationship with most females that he has come across.
Yeah, or people.
Or people.
As far as we know,
we don't know, I guess. But I just kind of assume, especially the attractive ones, and based on what we've seen in the Last Shot novel as well, which I had just finished. You're still working your way through, but we see some of that as well, where the relationships he's definitely available.
Yeah.
For lack of a better word. So it wouldn't surprise me if they did at one point. Now, whether or not it was anything, I'm going to use the word serious very loosely, but I imagine it was for business type of thing. But who knows? But I'm assuming, I think there was something. Because clearly she doesn't strike me as the kind that would want to make Han jealous. She just maybe got caught up in the revelry for a moment. But yeah, I did catch that as well.
Yeah.
And I think there was something there.
Well, do you think we see the suave, debonair, like smooth talking Lando in this movie much. I think we get it when we first meet Kira. And I'm trying to think back on the movie, and I haven't seen it in about a week, but I'm trying to think back now. Were there ever any other moments or even opportunities outside of L3-37 where we would have seen that particular side of Lando?
Well, I think we definitely see it in the gambling game, in the Sabacc game.
Yeah.
Because at least he's got the bravado, right? And everything you've heard about me is true, and just the interaction, and he's playing the crowd at Han's expense. So I think we get a little bit of that. We don't necessarily get the negotiating aspect of it.
Yeah.
Right, if that makes sense. So I don't think we see some of that, but I think we definitely see, well, and even back on the Falcon, we see a little bit of that too, I think. But again, I think you're right, though. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for him to really show where he excels in the swindling side of things.
Yeah. And not to rehash what we kind of had in our reaction show, but because we are focusing on Lando, if you didn't hear the other show, I mean, I think we both agree that we felt like Glover did a really good job in channeling Lando Calrissian. Still feel the same way after a few showings? Anything change there for you?
No, not at all. I think he's still spot on. He nailed everything.
Yeah, I would agree. And my original, I guess my first opinion was that I think I mentioned that it felt like he came on a little too strong with trying to sound like Lando Calrissian. I would say after multiple viewings, it's, the edges come off a little bit for me. So it doesn't really stick out like it used to. If anything, it's just makes me think that, okay, yeah, this is really him. And when I get to, Empire, that's really him too. So, again, hats off to Donald Glover for his portrayal as Lando Calrissian. So we talked about the Falcon, and then I guess one of the other things that we had up in here was the daddy issues. And it's interesting because I think in the EU, if I could just go there real quick, if I remember correctly, he did come from a pretty good family. Like, I don't remember anything ever being broken. I could be off there, but I'm almost positive that, he knew his mom and knew his dad. They were just fine people, really. There was nothing really big there. But then in here, we get kind of a sense that, from the line that he really wasn't close with his father. And much like we talked about on the review show or the reaction show, it's just another instance in Star Wars. We've got daddy issues. We've got, daughters and sons who either aren't close to their parents and particularly their father. And, some of them are, unfortunately paying for the sins of their fathers in the way of Luke and Leia, and others are just, dealing with their own turmoil, like Ben Solo and his father. So any thoughts or theories or anything that came out from maybe even the last shots that I haven't gotten through that, and I don't want to make this a spoiler show, but anything that we would glean from any of that would kind of maybe give us more clues into what really was going on there with his father?
No, not that I recall. It was that fleeting moment in the movie, and that was it. And we don't need to get bogged down in getting all of the backstory, but when you have a good character, you're always interested in just knowing a little bit more about what makes them tick and about what is driving them, in their own personal agenda, or what's holding them back at the same time. And so when they make little comments like this, there's always something there. And we got a flavor of the backstory with Han, but we really got nothing here. It was just like, yeah, I get you kind of thing. And that was really it. So I'm hoping at some point they're able to sneak some of that in, even if it's just in a little bit of dialogue in another piece of material. But no, I wish we'd just get a little more hint so that we can understand what is driving Lando Calrissian and what's preventing him from making progress in general. Yeah.
And we probably, my guess is we probably will at some point. I mean, this is a character that's been in, obviously, now 2 sets of movies. We've got him in, or at least 3 movies, right? We've also got him in like video games. And he was in Battlefront 2 in the single story mode with him and Shriv.
Right.
So, he's obviously a huge character, and there's a lot of story left to be told. I kind of skipped over Rebels. He was in Rebels too. Yep.
He's also got his own comic book now that's set in this timeline as well.
Yeah,
so
and
maybe we'll glean something from there. I think that's only an issue or 2 in right now.
Yeah, I think they've got one. I thought it was a 2-parter, but I may be wrong there. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of story left to be told with Lando Calrissian, and especially with the sequel movies, I don't get the sense of this movie. maybe let's kind of go there real quick. So I was trying to think of like, okay, so what elements did we get from this movie that we saw would play later on in like Empire Strikes Back? And we've kind of hit on some of them already, right? We've talked about maybe his personality, the way he's a smooth talker with the ladies. We didn't get the businessman kind of aspect of it. But one aspect that I thought was interesting is, when 3PO is, blown to bits, right? And Han immediately knows that Lando's people can fix him. I'm referring to Empire Strikes Back here. I think we got the seeds here and you've got this in the show notes. We get the sense that Lando is very connected with androids, and he's got an affinity for them. They're more than just a general interest, so much that they're a part of his personal life. But we do get a very good sense that he is very close with androids, and that would later obviously play in with Lobot, right? And his relationship there with Lobot being as close as they were. But anything else, and we can come back to that in a second, because I do want to talk a little bit more about droids and L3-37 and all that. But anything else that we saw here that when you look back on Empire Strikes Back, or maybe you look back on Return of the Jedi, that you kind of saw some of those initial seeds there? And you can talk about the capes if you want to.
The Falcon, I think, is the one that keeps coming back, and they're more fleeting moments. What have you done with my ship type of thing? And even after all these years, it's not. It's still raw. It's still on the surface in raw form, right? To where it's a little playful, but it's definitely something that they both had something for that ship.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you're right. There wasn't enough there that really tugged you back and forth between them too much. And one of the interesting things, though, and again, to reference Last Shot, they dropped in there that his business is, I don't know if it's the manufacturing of droids or something like that, but he's got kind of a droid empire. So it seems like he swung the pendulum really far off and became, I think he purchased or inherited some manufacturing company. And so,
his title is impresario, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Impresario Calrissian or something like that.
Right. So he's got this empire for, mechanics. And so it's, we definitely see that parallel with his ability to interact with droids, but also manufacture and make profit for the whole, for the same thing that L3 stood for, which we'll get into. It seems like a little bit of irony that that's what he was doing, is he's putting droids into servitude basically too, right?
Yeah. And not to get into a Last Shot dialogue, but I don't know what your take was on that chef droid, that kitchen droid.
Oh my goodness.
I thought it was hilarious. I don't know and I know you did the audiobook, but I was laughing at the regular book, and maybe I was just too tired. I don't know.
The audiobook rendition of it was pretty wild.
Was it? I imagine it was pretty over the top, just based on the way it was written. So
it was over the top.
Yeah. But yeah. Anyways.
So before we leave Lando, do we want to talk about him and Han's interactions with one another and compare their approaches?
So before we go there, I just have one question about the Falcon. Did we don't get the name of, we don't know why it's called the Millennium Falcon. And that's just something as a kid that I always wondered, like where the name came from, because it's a cargo ship, right? I mean, that's what it was originally created to do. Right. And somewhere it got the name Millennium Falcon, but is that something that you'd be interested in seeing, like the backstory, like the origin of why it got that name? And it could be something glamorous that, I don't know, there is a falcon or some kind of a bird or something, or it could just be something where someone says, I don't know, let's call it the Millennium Falcon. But would that be of interest to you, or are we revealing too much at that point? Are we getting too much into the origins with some of the Star Wars characters and objects?
I'm going to go with the latter. I think that starts straying a little too far down of a ship name is a ship name sometimes. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of, we do this with boats and things like that, right? So we want to assign some sort of personal connection to it. And so that might be interesting or cool to hear, but I don't necessarily want it. I don't know how I'd want to hear that, I guess. I'm trying to think how I'd want it. If that were to come about, how would that even happen? Yeah. But it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I don't need it though.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It's a mild curiosity that I've had, I think, for a long time. And now I think in thinking back though, but I mean, in retrospect, we've gotten so much origin for everything else that, I think at this point that, I'd be like, okay, well, I guess I don't need to know that anymore. But at one point it was high up on my list. So, So let's talk Han and Lando, because they've got a very interesting relationship, for lack of a better term. And I don't want to steal any thunder from you, but there's one thing that just jumps to mind immediately in the last shot that was kind of surprising. As I was reading, there's a scene in there where Lando and Han meet up for the first time, and I'm using "meet up" in quotes. They meet up for the first time in the book, and this is obviously taking place right after Return of the Jedi. And you see Lando sees Han, and the first thing he does is he punches him in the face and knocks him out.
Yep.
And you would think that by that point, they would be well beyond that kind of juvenile, those juvenile tendencies. And I don't know, that's maybe not even a fair choice of words there. But I mean, I can't think of any of my friends that I was close to. And I've never been through war with any of them. I've never relied on one of them to, take down a shield and so that I can blow up this, Death Star thing. But I can't think of any friends that is as little as we've been through together that I would even consider punching another person in the face. And it was jarring because maybe I would have expected that, somewhere in that Empire Strikes Back era, especially after he kind of turned him over to Boba Fett and Vader. But, a lot of times pass and they've been through a lot, and you got the sense that they were back on good terms again. And here they go,
right.
Just punching them in the mouth. So,
no, I definitely got that throughout the whole book. And I left myself wondering, why do they still, at least in that depiction of it, why do they still have this really hot, cold relationship where they're clearly best friends, get along very similar in a lot of different ways, but then they could just absolutely loathe and despise each other at the same time. And it's like a light switch. And I did not get as much of that in Solo, the movie, but it was very apparent in the book, and again, the book is largely, well after Return of the Jedi and those events. But in this one, we got that contrast, especially after, Han basically wrecked his ship. But at the same time, when he said he hates him, I didn't even really feel like he really hated him all that much, because they still had kind of this cool adventure, except he wrecked his ship and got him shot, I guess.
Yeah. And I never took that line in the movie, I hate you. I know. I mean, it was kind of I just saw it as more of a, hey, look what we're doing. You see a very similar exchange in Empire Strikes Back between Han and Leia. I never really took it at face value that was really him saying, I hate you. I'm sure he meant it to some extent. But the fact that they were both alive, and at least at that point, he felt like he was about to collect a ton of money. Right. I don't really get the sense that he really truly hated him, but it did seem like their whole relationship seems very spy versus spy for maybe that like Mad Magazine, where they're just constantly trying to one up one another, and there's a lot of physical violence there. And I think back to like when he sees the two scenes, the one in Solo at the very end when he sees him and he kind of jukes him out a little bit, and you can see Lando's face like he looks scared, like he was about to punch me. And then we get that again come up in Empire Strikes Back, where it looks like, hey, he's about to punch me. And man, maybe that's just their thing. Maybe that's the way their relationship. I wouldn't go so far as to call them best friends, but they're certainly buddies. And they're certainly close. I think, Chewie and Han are probably best friends, but it's just a weird relationship. And again, maybe we'll talk more about the book at some point down the road, but it's interesting to hear that this is going to continue in the last shot as well.
Right. Well, what is fun to compare, though, is how they approach things, though. They're very much in the same business, but they don't really approach things the same way. But I'm kind of curious, as we talk through that just a little bit, do they actually get to the same place? And is that a good place?
Yeah.
So when we look at their approaches, Han very much just kind of jumps head first, right? Doesn't necessarily have a plan, just thinks. The impression we get from Lando is that he's scheming. He likes to tell stories. He's very much a con artist, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it was the official guide said that he avoids physical exertion, which I think we definitely see, because when you're dressed up in those kind of duds, you don't go to get messed up.
Yeah, at one point he's yelling he's like, no, not my cape, or not that cape. It's a whatever, when she was trying to put the fire out. I mean, he's materialistic in that way too.
Yeah, and when you wear your cruising pants, your white pants,
Right, yeah.
you don't expect to go out there and get a little dirty, right? But what I was curious about is even with those differences, they both seem to end up in these, and maybe it's just this adventure that we have. But I'm curious, do you think that Lando, in general, when he's doing these schemes, how well do you think they actually turn out? Do they go to plan, or is he having to improvise as well?
No, I mean, I get the sense that I get the sense that in his mind he's got it all laid out, or at least he's got a number of steps already planned ahead of him. But I never really got the sense that Lando, in anything, whether it be the comic, the book, the movie, whatever it is that I've read so far, I can't say that I feel like it ever goes the way it's supposed to. Very much like Han Solo, I don't think it ever goes right for Han Solo. He gets by on good luck, merits, good charm, that kind of thing, which is part of his character. But yeah, I think maybe I don't know if this is the point you're trying to make, is that they both have different ways they approach things, but at the end, it never ever goes the way that it's supposed to, and somehow they're very successful and they continue to pull these things off. I think the big glaring one is obviously with Vader showing up on Cloud City. I'm sure he tried everything in the book to get everything arranged the way he wanted, thought it was going to go that way, and then of course now he's taken Han Solo, and he wants to take Leia and with a Wookiee, and everything's just kind of falling apart right before his eyes. I think that's par for course for this guy. As great as a con man he is, I think in the end, like I said, he pulls it off, and he's got that card up his sleeve every single time. But I don't get the sense that this is everything's perfect, and he's 2 steps ahead of everyone at all times. I just never got that from him. Right.
I mean, clearly he's a skilled pilot, and he's pretty skilled with a blaster too. So you imagine, he's got into a lot of scrapes in order to be that good at some of those things. And again, we'll reference Last Shot for just a moment. Fast forward to the future, or future from this movie, and Han makes a comment that they have the 2 best pilots in the galaxy with Han and Lando.
Mm.
And so Lando being that one, and the official guide makes as many comments as well. And we'll talk a little bit about that here with L3. But clearly he's got skills, and those are honed over a lifetime of making deals and doing scams and those falling through. But that's an interesting take. I just always curious if he actually was let's kind of go back to the winner or loser comment. It seems like he wins more than he loses. I mean, clearly he's really successful when he gets to Bespin, but in the meantime, it seems a bit more hit and miss in his youth still.
So let's talk about L3-37. We've got just a little bit of time left here. And particularly let's talk about what we know. So what we know about her, I guess, is kind of very little. We, again, if you go, we obviously know her fate, and prior to that, there's not a whole lot that's been canon so far. Well, to be fair, there's really not anything in there that's legend, so don't go look for it. But, we didn't get a whole lot outside of we know she was Lando's co-pilot. We know that they have a peculiar relationship, which we can talk about in a little bit. But apart from that, what we know is really literally what we see when, the movie picks up and we were first introduced to her, there on Vandor. So, but one of the more interesting aspects of her, and this is, documented in the guide. I think Lando makes a reference to it in the movie, but that she's self-made, and someone created her. We know that. But then at some point, because of her level of sentience, she's gone out and she did a pick and pull. She went out and got pieces of other droids, and she's made her own modifications and upgraded herself in a lot of different ways. So, yes, she did have somebody who made her, but she's at that level now where she's able to, she calls herself self-made, right? She's made many modifications to herself.
Right.
Which I thought was a very interesting aspect, because even with like C-3PO, right? And he's probably the more, I'm trying to think of other droids that we've had, at least in the movies, that have been, very highly intelligent, effective in communicating, that kind of thing. You never got the sense that he was above humans, right? Even like somebody like K2 wasn't really as snarky and as sarcastic as he was. You never got that sense of it. But man, you really got it in droves with L3-37 in terms of where she was and where she felt like she should be. in the grand scheme of like class or standing with other living beings. What's your take on, I guess, on all of that with her and her self-made and the self-awareness that she had as a droid?
What's not clear to me is that the assembly of the different parts and the way that she was made has increased her self-awareness, which I'm curious how that works. So in Last Shot, they also made this comment. It was a quiet moment with them, and she's questioning the maker type of thing and making some comments around, that she's effectively her own maker. Mm-hmm. And that type of deep thought isn't typical. But what is it about the way that she's done this that's actually allowed that to happen? And I can't get my head around how that works and what that is. So, because it's a really interesting evolutionary type of discussion. I don't know if you can call it evolution, but for lack of a better word, maybe we can call it that for now, of how that's possible and what tinkering does she do that actually improves that? And is it general, or is it, gradual, or is it very much I plug in a new part and I gain a lot of different experiences and all of that starts to reform kind of her matrix of sorts. Mm-hmm. So it's very unclear how that actually works. And that's the part that I find myself more interested in is how does this happen with droids in general, but with L3 in particular, where it is so deeply self-aware, and she has a mission in life, which is just different than a lot in life. Yeah. Like 3PO likes to remind us, right? Having a mission versus a lot, very, very different.
Right. Well, so, I'm not going to pretend to be a Star Trek fan or fanatic or even any particular person that could really speak with the utmost confidence about Star Trek. But I do know enough, having watched Next Generation. If you think back to like Data, right? So Data was the one character, and Mike's going to kill me because I'm talking about Star Trek on Star Wars. But anyways, Data was one of those characters that was, I think they called him a cyborg, an android, whatever he was. Again, I'm not showing my true colors here, but there were a number of episodes that I do recall where this came into play. I think at one point, he was trying to fight for his own rights, and they always chalked it up to his programming. So he had this kind of this new high-tech, highly evolved computer program that was the primary driver of him wanting to become sentient or feeling like he was human, and allowed him to have human emotions and all that. It was all programmed, but you got the sense that it was something more, that it was just something mystical or magical about it. Not I don't mean that in a literal sense. I just meant that this was clearly a cut above the normal technology, the normal tech, the normal program that allowed him to go that one step further. And it started to blur the lines between, an android or a robot versus a human being with personality and feelings and that kind of thing. And so I don't know, maybe that's some of it here. Maybe we've got, maybe she's tinkering or tweaking her own programming, which I wouldn't put it past her, but maybe she's doing that. And, the more she interacts with humans, much like, again, Data, the more that she interacts with humans, the more she learns that, okay, now this is the outcome of these types of scenarios, these types of circumstances. I need to program that in here. And through this constant evolution, this constant reprogramming, retweaking, she's gotten to the point now where, there's probably there's little left to do. She's probably at a point now where she just feels like she is human. And we know this. We know that, from the Last Shot and some of the other stuff from like the guide, they have a relationship. She obviously thinks that Lando, has got feelings for her. I think in my own head, I got the sense that she was very emotionally attached to Lando. And I never got the sense that Lando reciprocated that until, she falls apart literally on Kessel. Because the reaction for Lando was very shocking for me, at least, because I didn't, at least in the first viewing, I mean, now it's not, but in the first viewing, I didn't really get the sense again that was really reciprocated. It was just kind of a one-sided thing. Oh, that's his buddy, that kind of stuff. But I mean, if you go back and watch that scene, he's really torn up. Like he's in, again, no pun intended, but he's really torn up that she's torn up, that, that she was destroyed, and then he loses her. And it's like he lost not his dog. He lost his friend, his lover, whatever it was, or whatever she was to him. So, yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think that we have somebody like this. Going back to that. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we see with Lando, especially when you have the lifestyle that they're leading, is that trust is very difficult to earn and keep. And I think when we talk about maybe his interaction with droids, I think it's easier to have a trustworthy relationship with droids because usually their protocols are fairly clear, right? You can trust them with things. You tell them not to do something, or you program them not to do certain things. They won't, for the most part. So even though L3 had a very dynamic personality and was able to grow and achieve different things, they had very much that trust, and that part of the relationship, I think, is something that he valued probably above anything else. Is that was his not second command, but right hand, person. I don't know what to call her, but that was the one. So if Chewie is Han's, L3 was Lando's, right? Yeah. And not only from making the Falcon run better and run and do all the things it can do, but someone had his back, and it was unquestionable that she would always be there for him. And so when he lost that, he knew that this adventure was going to end at some point and that everyone was going to go their separate ways. And now he doesn't have her. And so now he presumably has no one that he can rely on and trust.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that can be really devastating.
Yeah. And you put this question out there of why is Lando closer to droids than humans? And I'm sure there's some psychology out there in the same way that people are closer to like their pets, right, than other human beings, or right. People that are closer to friends and family, or you've got people that are closer to online friends rather than, people they know and see and interact with every single day. But yeah, I kind of got that sense too. And you were just touching on that maybe he just gravitates to androids because of trust issues. And we don't know what that could be. It could be a number of different things, but, or just being able to know that at the end of the day, if he really wanted to know more, he could, because they are a droid. He could go in and invade the program or do whatever else he needed to do. It just seems like, again, they probably are more trustworthy. And even if they weren't, he can manipulate that trust. I'm not saying it's a control thing or a power thing or anything like that, or even a class thing. I don't know where he feels like droids are in relationship to people, but if you think about it, I would make an assumption that most of the characters that we know in Star Wars, based on what we've read in everything from canon books, movies to EU books and movies, droids are not, they're not at the top of the class chain, and most people look down to them, and most people talk, they treat them like crap. They treat them like indentured servants and slave labor, and that's kind of where L3-37 is coming from. But if Lando does feel that way too, or he was brought up that way, suddenly you've got, let's throw Lobot in there. You've got two droids, so to speak, and that's not really fair to Lobot. He's half, but whatever.
He's just enhanced, right?
He's just enhanced, right? Let's just say L3-37. But you've got this droid now who is not like any other droid that we've ever seen, and probably he's never seen, and most people have never seen. She makes up a percentage of a percentage in terms of all the droids that are out there. That's probably very fascinating to him that they're, that this one particular one is, his co-pilot, his best friend, his lover, whatever it is. And so, yeah, I would imagine they've got a pretty close relationship from that.
Well, the other thing that's interesting is that there's no judgment. And so when he goes off and does things, she kind of accepts it and doesn't necessarily judge him for it. And we got a flavor of this in the book, was that she sees through all of the bravado and all of the flings and all these other things that he does. And she sees through that, and she sees that somewhere deep down, there is a person who wants to do the right thing, and it will come out eventually. And it's always there. And so you also have this lack of judgment, because what are sentient creatures going to do? We judge people all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And even for
and we have our own prejudice as to why things happen, right?
Absolutely. To the smallest detail, little things set us off, right? So, but while she has this self-awareness and she gives him a hard time about some things, and they have this, it's almost more of a banter, even though I think it means something to her. It does clearly mean something to her. She reserves judgment on him. And I almost think it's, it's kind of the other way around. Well, he's organic. He can't help himself. he's predisposed to do stupid stuff.
Yeah.
And so in that regard, she is superior than humans or organic creatures in general, because they're inherently flawed, and she can continue to improve.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good point. So I guess let's see. So we've still got L3 and the Falcon. We want to talk a little bit about that. The biggest one we know is, the fact that she plugged herself in, or they plugged her in, and she became now part of the Millennium Falcon. If not the Millennium Falcon, you could argue that. But if it's what I found interesting about that is if you accept that L3 and the Millennium Falcon are kind of one and the same, then she kind of gets a lot of credit for a lot of the stuff that's happened in the past now, at least in the past, or what would be the future for her. But you have helping to pull Vader out of the trench in A New Hope, right? I mean, we're going to talk about this too, because I don't know how much of this now steals from Han, but whatever. You've got the trench scene. Han comes in, saves the day. She's a part of that. Rescuing Han, rescuing Han, Leia, Chewie, and 3PO off Hoth. She's a part of that. Navigating the asteroid field in the Millennium Falcon. That's her as well. The Death Star 2 and Lando. She's a part of that. We've got everything from The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens. I mean, she's just kind of become now synonymous, at least in my mind, with the Millennium Falcon. And I don't think I really have a problem with that, to be honest. I think some people do, and I've seen it, and I think it's valid. I'm not discrediting those opinions of it, but I actually do like this aspect of it. I don't really have a problem with the fact that, the Millennium Falcon and for as cool of a ship as it is and its abilities to do what it's done so far in all of these movies and books and stuff, I think it's kind of a neat concept to think that this is part of her and she had a part to play in all of that.
Yeah, I agree. And what's interesting, though, is that she was actually plugging herself into the Falcon before she actually became part of the Falcon.
Oh, right. Yeah. Because she pulled that thing right off her stomach or whatever it is and just popped it right in.
Right. Yeah. So they're already interfacing back and forth in order to make these complex, hyperspace routes. And I think that's what gives the Falcon she's always been a part of the Falcon that is making it special, because they can do these certain things. Now, the official guide has a nice little section about this. It's very short, but it talks a little bit about that. Even with the navigator on the Navicomputer on the Falcon being state of the art, her ability to interface with it really makes it all that much better. It makes it unparalleled. And we had a listener feedback question about, is it really the fastest ship in the galaxy? And I think this is where you start to see that maybe it can be in very specific circumstances, especially for hyperspace. But to kind of go to the pilot question, it still takes someone with fast reflex maneuvers, as the book says here, to do all this at sublight. So it's very much a partnership still. And so it's a partnership between Lando and L3. It's a partnership between Han and Chewie, clearly, when they're in the ship, even though they've got her as the Navicomputer. And she's playing into that as well. And perhaps even R2 is doing a little bit of it too now. But it's still very much a partnership. I don't think it takes away from anything of Han being an amazing pilot, because he's doing all the crazy moves in Empire, squeezing between asteroids, even on the Kessel Run. He's doing all these crazy things. The computer isn't going to do that from a reflex perspective.
Yeah.
So it's very much the planning these super optimal routes that seemingly can't be replicated except in this very specific circumstance. So how that works is kind of another one, kind of along with L3, is what makes that so special now? How are they actually able to do this where she's, you got a great computer already on board, but now you've got an unparalleled mapping system in her head, and it just adds more questions, where's some of that coming from now too? But I thought this really does a great job. I recommend anybody go find this little blurb here. It's called A Clever Copilot. And it just talks a little bit about that. Not in any great detail, but it just talks a little bit about that of how they play off of each other and what her contribution, really is. And you really can't have one without the other.
And so I'll just throw that question out there to any of the listeners that want to chime in either on social media or in Discord. I think we'll probably hear the most of it. But do you guys feel like this was, having her plugged in now or being part of the Falcon, did it take away anything from the Kessel Run in your mind? And it's really just it's an opinion question. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but I'm just curious as to what other people are thinking there. And one kind of maybe just last thing, and we've talked a lot about that one particular line with 3PO saying, I don't know where your computer learned to talk, it's got the most peculiar language, and I'm paraphrasing. We've talked about that line a lot and going, oh, wow, that's a big eye-opening moment. But there was one that dawned on me as part of show prep that I hadn't really considered. But if you go back to Return of the Jedi, when Han's talking to Lando, and he's like, take her. I want you to take her. I don't know, and I've actually never really researched this, to be honest. When that line is said, I always just thought they were trying to make you think, oh, they're talking about Leia, right? And then you realize, oh, okay, they're talking about the ship, and they've given a gender to the ship. But now when I see that line, I can't help but think that they're talking about L3. That he's literally saying, I want you to take L3, maybe the Millennium Falcon too. But it puts it in a different context now, I think, for me.
What's curious about that is why would Lando kind of push back on that? I mean, this is revisionist history, right? So,
right.
But it's like, why would he push back on that? Saying, well, I know how much she means to you.
Yeah.
Well, no, she means a lot to you now too, dude.
Yeah.
Right. So, and this is, you're trying to slot everything in place after, so many years. But when you look at that, it's like, okay, why would he be standoffish about that? Now, granted, when we lose something important to us, sometimes it's easier to keep that distance even after a very long time.
Sure.
And to not continue to engage in that and to, rehash old wounds and reopen those. So you could go from that perspective too, that, on the surface, he wasn't quite ready, even after all these years, to do that. But of course, then we see all the things he was able to do with the ship and Jedi, and ultimately may make a big difference on the Death Star run.
And then our final question, and I'll kind of throw this out to you, something that I kind of threw in here last minute, but was really just, and I'm not asking for ranking, but how would you say, looking back on L3-37, how would you say she stacks up against some of the other prominent droids that we have in Star Wars, like, R2, 3PO, Chopper, BB-8, K2? Because we've had a lot of great droids, a lot of great personalities, but I guess where would you put her? Or what are maybe some of her final thoughts in terms of where she would rank, I guess, amongst these guys?
Well, I think she fits with all of them, at least in some regards. The nice thing about Star Wars droids and the ones that we get to see on screen all the time are that they all have this attitude to them. They all have a mind of their own. They have a way of thinking, and they're not just drones for the most part. But the one that I think she relates maybe closest to is K2SO, at least for me. Mm-hmm. So he had, I don't know, they just seemed like if you had them together, that would be an interesting dynamic.
It'd be a great comedy sitcom.
It would be, but would they get along? And I kind of think that eventually they would, because he had this very sardonic way of doing everything, and she has kind of that same nature. And I kind of wonder if as they argued back and forth, you're right, is one of these sitcom type of things where it's this odd couple of sorts that are so alike, but they fit well and mesh pretty well with each other. Now they've got different agendas, but I could see where K2 could get on that agenda without really that much effort.
Yeah, right. I mean, she's unique, and I don't think it'd be fair to compare her and K2, say one's better than the other, or I like one or the other. I don't think I could even do that.
They're so different. They're so very different. Yeah.
And I think her biggest disadvantage is the fact that, I mean, if you were to take a timer and record her screen time from Solo, I'm going to bet it's not more than 10 minutes. It's got to be less than that. And it obviously feels like more because, in the context of beginning to end, it just, she's got bigger presence. But I think a lot of what we know about her and a lot about what we see about her really comes from Lando, right? And maybe the interactions with the other characters. But really, she's not on screen very long. And that's not to say that K2 really had a lot of screen time either. But I mean, they're probably more on par with each other in terms of their exposure. But I don't know. She really wasn't in the movie that long, and she wasn't. She kind of has a disadvantage that we didn't really get to see a lot of her. So I don't think it's fair to to pit her up and say, oh, she's not as cool as 3PO, or she's not as cool as R2 or Chopper or any of these other robot or androids, right? Because I mean that's not really fair to compare at all, because those guys have been on so much stuff already.
Right. I just like how they all fit a different need for the story. Yeah, they don't. You don't want them to be alike. And one of the problems I've had with Han and Lando is that their characters are actually quite a bit alike, except for the style aspect of things. They really do things very similarly, and it's sometimes they're not different enough for me to think that that's an interesting relationship in order to keep following and to stay engaged with. And so what I've liked about the droids with BB-8 and K2, and I didn't really like Chopper early on, but as I got used to him, and then B, they toned some of the antics down a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but they kept that personality. I really started to enjoy him more and more, and his design is great, which I really like that too.
Oh, I love Chopper, by the way.
I like him too. I just early on he was a little over the top for me, but each one of these fills a different niche, and they're not carbon copies of one another. They're not all trying to be R2-D2. They're not all trying to capture that magic. Again, they have a uniqueness to them, and I think L3 is very much her own unique one, and she had some really great moments in the movie of showing that uniqueness and giving us a different flavor of how droids can fit into the Star Wars universe. Whether we like it or not, it's a different take on it that I think is fun. And, I enjoyed seeing that on screen. I enjoyed the interactions on the Falcon. So I think it was a very different type of character that she felt as human as any other character in the story.
So any final thoughts? I guess I know you kind of just did that with L3-37, but any final thoughts for on Lando or L3-37 before we close this out?
No, I think I'm tapped out, man. Why don't you give me yours?
So I would say for Lando, there's obviously a lot of story that's still left to be told. There's some pieces that I don't think we can conclusively put together yet, which is fine with me. And, whether we get that in sequel movies, hopefully, or a book or whatever else, I'm looking forward to that. But I think I'm also more curious. I think Lando's got a lot of story left too, not just in this era, but, later on.
Absolutely.
I'm probably more intrigued and more fascinated with to kind of find out how that played out.
He was very much a peripheral character in this. So you're right. We didn't get a lot of development for him.
Yeah.
So,
and
it's going to happen though, right?
Yeah. I hope so. I think there's a lot to be said still there for L3-37, honestly, and there are a lot of people that don't like this character. Mike has been pretty vocal about not liking her. I happen to, as unpopular as may be for some people, I like L3-37. I don't have a problem with her. And I think it's pretty reasonable to think that you would have a droid that is this self-aware and it is fighting for a cause and liberating robots. You could chalk that up to craziness, bad programming, whatever you want, or even just, a right, or maybe she's in the right in that. I don't know. But I thought it was fitting for the character. I think if you didn't have that aspect of it, that whole last scene on Kessel where all the droids are revolting is still funny, but it's not nearly as funny. And so it all kind of fits together. And I thought they did a good job with her, to be honest. I didn't mind the character. And hats off to the Phoebe Waller. I'm forgetting the actress's name now.
Yep, no, that's right.
Yeah, but, hats off to her, too. I thought she did a really good job. And I went and looked at read some of the interviews and that sort of thing. She seems like a really great person, too. So I'm glad they got to see some of that in her portrayal of L3-37. So I guess that's it. That's probably my last thought. We'll close this out and just say thank you guys for listening. If you'd like to find us on Instagram, we're at The Cantina Cast. We're at Twitter, at The Cantina Cast. Facebook /The Cantina Cast. You can send us some fan mail at cantinacastfanmail@gmail.com. We've had a few of those come in lately, and thank you guys for sending those in. We're trying to reply to those as soon as they pop in. And then obviously you can find us on iTunes for the podcast. Leave a good review if you'd like what you're hearing. And we've got a Discord channel, Patreon, TeePublic. We'll put all the links in the show notes. And I think with that, we'll say goodbye. Any last words, Johnny, before we go here?
No, we'll see you next week. Find us out on Discord, and I just gave a 2-finger salute. No one saw that, but I still can't stop.
I did the same thing at the same time. It's so weird.
Oh, man. All
right.
I'm
kidding. Yeah. All right,
you're L3. I'm Lando.
Yeah. Well, okay. Wait, we'll talk about that after the show. We'll be back next week with, we'll talk some Han and some Kira. And we maybe even mix in a couple more characters as we continue on with our solo coverage. So,
see you guys soon.
See you.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.